again, he's gone through a lot for a young player. He's been through a lot of ups and downs. And to be the kind of person he is from everybody you talk to,
dang it.
This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. From the big plays to life's everyday moments, see it all in sharp focus with LASIK at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIK.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, Josh McCuistion here on a Friday. Good Friday to you, actually. July 12th, George not with us. Wedding prep as we enter into the Stoya weekend for the nuptials. Josh, welcome back from vacation. You missed a little bit. Had a commitment on Monday. Tyler Ruxer. That obviously goes hand in hand with you being out of town, but there was a lot of football content as Joe Castiglione announces his retirement on Monday. We haven't really heard you sound off on it, but 28 years. I know that George and I did a couple of videos at the beginning of the week here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel, kind of talking about it. Just your overall thoughts. It was a little bit surprising, but maybe it makes sense when you sit down and think about it.
oh, yeah. I mean, like it makes all the sense in the world. This is something where you've watched how much college football has evolved. And Eddie, you think about Nick Saban, Bob Stoops, you go through all these legends of coaching that have walked away. It only stands to reason that a guy like Castiglione, who's been around longer than any of them, is maybe going to hit a wall with that sort of thing too. And I don't
Sure.
know that had anything to do with it, but it makes sense logically. So again, I hope that 10 years from now, some of the fan base that has frustrations or whatever it is can look back and think about all the incredible things Joe Castiglione's done for this university and where it was when I think there's too many people that are young and don't realize where things were when he arrived. And now, even if football isn't where you want it to be, how strong the athletic department is as a whole.
No doubt about it. 26 national titles, 117 conference championships. I think the body of work certainly presents a idea that Oklahoma fans have been lucky over the course of 27, 28 years, and now going into the final year, it's going to be super interesting to see which way Randall Stevenson and the search committee goes to fill the shoes left by Joe Castiglione. This is the recruiting report, though. Plenty to get into this week as we started the week with continued good news for Joe John Finley and the Oklahoma tight end position. Oklahoma picks up a commitment from Tyler Ruxer on Monday afternoon. Not bad over at Heritage Hills High School there in Indiana. Had Tyler Ruxer obviously committing to Oklahoma, had a teammate commit to Ole Miss. So two players coming out of the state of Indiana joining the party in the SEC. Josh, we talked about Tyler Ruxer, though, 6'4", 220, made the announcement on Monday afternoon and joins Ryder Mix in the Oklahoma 2026 class in the tight end position.
Yeah, and Eddie, what's interesting to me is I think we all have talked about, okay, Tyler Ruxer's a great athlete. He's got these track times, and that's really what initially attracted Oklahoma to him. And we wrote a story about him mentioning Jim Nagy being a guy that really kind of spearheaded this. And I my story was really focused on, is this kind of what this is going to look like going forward for Oklahoma, where you have that front office staff finding talent and really putting it in front of the coaching staff and then letting the coaching staff do what they do. But what I think is interesting is talking to one of the other staffs that was involved in his recruitment. They actually liked him on the defensive side of the ball. They saw him as a linebacker. So I think some of the narrative has almost become like, oh, he's kind of this flex tight end and he's an athlete. He's 6'4", 220. Like, he is a big-bodied guy that I think can absolutely do everything you would want out of a tight end. So I think he's a little more complete than maybe his track times make people think.
We talked about it. I think it was on Monday, right after the commitment. I think it was on one of it might have been on Around the Quarter this week. Just how surprising in the grand scheme of things. And I think that anybody that's watched the program knows our feelings on where the tight end position has been. Here moving forward for Joe John Finley, now that you have Ryder Mix and Tyler Ruxer in tow, pretty good, solid job. It's in terms of, George had a question in his mailbag this week. How surprising is it that it could be argued that Joe John Finley has one of the better position groups outside of John Mateer, the quarterback, obviously, within this 2026 class?
Yeah, I mean, if the only argument for a player position is if Oklahoma lands Jake Krull. That's the
Sure,
only way
sure.
you end up with a group where I say, okay, that's a better group. But with that exception, this is outstanding work. And I think you get two tight ends who are different in the way they do things. But I think, like I just said, I think Tyler is more physical than he gets credit for. I also think Austin Mix is a better athlete than he gets credit for. So I think those guys are kind of diverse. They do stuff that complements each other really well. I think it's a really solid group. And with all the kind of trials and tribulations and problems that they've had at tight end, it's got to feel good for Joe John Finley to just, I hate to say maybe a little bit of a middle finger to guys like us at times, but I wouldn't blame him if he did it because, again, this is a good group and he did it kind of in long odds, like not in a situation that you would expect this to play out.
I would point out there's still going to be maybe some questions about this current team and the tight end unit here coming up in about a month when they start practice here at Norman. But all things considered, really good start. Tyler Ruxer getting into the mix. There we go with Ryder Mix. We're all sorts all over the place here on the tight end position, but nonetheless, they do get the commitment. Yeah, and it's Ryder Mix. I know that, and I'm going to say it too, Josh. You mentioned when you were talking about Mix, you said Austin, his father, who was a former Oklahoma pitcher.
Oh.
But we're all getting into it. Shouldn't be throwing stones at glass houses around these parts. Speaking of Jake Krull, he did announce a top three on Tuesday. The defensive end out of IMG, very well known that Oklahoma. Definitely a priority. He did put out a final three, though. Texas, Oklahoma, Ole Miss. It seems like maybe a surprise. I know in past shows we talked about maybe Florida was going to make a move there for the IMG Academy pass rusher.
Yeah, that really did. That was the one surprise of that announcement. I think I would have expected instead of Ole Miss to find Florida in there. I know he likes Texas and obviously all the success they're having, their NIL capabilities, you kind of go down the list. But to not find Florida there, I think is a win for Oklahoma because that really, he's leaving home. Like if unless we have a Felix Ojo scenario where a team comes out of nowhere in this recruitment, I think you're going to see him leave the state of Florida. Obviously, I mean, it's right there in writing. And for that to be the case, I think Miguel Chavis is the best relationship he has. I think he really loves the way Oklahoma has recruited him. The way they've made it clear to anyone. I mean, Eddie, you've got Teddy Lehman talking about how much he recognizes what a priority Jake Krull is for Oklahoma. And I know Jake, I think, retweeted one of Gabe and Teddy's little quick snippets. So I think there's a lot of recognition. There's a lot of acknowledgement of how important he is. And I think Jake feels that. And I think that's a big deal. And to me, I think Jake Krull wants to see Oklahoma go out and play good football this year. Like, I think if they can answer that question, I think they're going to be really tough to beat in this recruitment. That's kind of where I'm at with him.
He's kind of one of those elite guys that, certainly if he wants to wait and see how Oklahoma season comes together, Oklahoma would have no problem allowing that and kind of putting the resume out there, if you will, throughout the 2025 season. I'm sure that, there's going to be a lot of attention placed on somebody like an R. Mason Thomas, who will be representing Oklahoma in Atlanta this next week at SEC Media Day. It wouldn't be a bad thing for him to go out and have a good year, maybe even somebody like a PJ Adebore as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because PJ, R. Mason's easy to point to, but R. Mason and Jake are kind of different types of players. And
sure.
Not that PJ and Jake are like for like, but he is a highly recruited guy. He would give OU some credibility. Like, look, even if it takes a little time, we're going to get you where you got to go. And so I think that would be really big. Even Eddie, another good one is a guy like Marvin Jones Jr.,
sure.
who was a Florida product, went to a huge Florida program, in American Heritage, and at the same time didn't really find success at Georgia, didn't really find success at Florida State, comes to Oklahoma, and it doesn't have to be, he led the SEC in sacks, but if you could even just put together a solid year where this was his best year to kind of say, hey, look what Miguel Chavis is doing with these guys. I think that is something that could also resonate. So there's a lot that Oklahoma has the advantage of making that sales pitch to Jake Krull as they come down the finish line here.
I am sure that the Oklahoma relationships with IMG, Jaden Jackson, David Stone, I'm sure are in his ear as well here as Oklahoma makes the top three for Jake Krull. Oklahoma good news might not end this week. Jacob Eberhart expected to make his announcement coming up on Saturday evening. The 6'1", 210 defensive back quarterback out of St. Louis Kirkland High School. We've talked about him here before. His head coach, Jeremy Maclin of Missouri Tiger fame, and I guess loosely connected to Oklahoma, all the battles that they went through, including him being committed to Oklahoma for a time. But Jacob Eberhart, it sounds like Oklahoma feels pretty good about this one.
Yeah, I think as we sit here on Friday afternoon that Oklahoma is still the favorite in this choice. Now, I will say, basically since getting back about 24 hours ago, there is some very real chatter that Illinois is trying to close this deal here at the end, trying to kind of swing the tide back in their direction. I don't know that I believe they're going to get that done. It kind of feels like if you were going to go that direction and you were going to, kind of make, and I don't want to dismiss it, but something of an emotional decision based on all his, his heart and his connection to Illinois, you kind of feel like that would have happened already.
Sure.
Now, still at the same time, I have talked to multiple people that Brett Bielema and his staff, they are going to chase him until signing day. So
right.
Like any thought that they get the commitment, it's done. No. Brandon Hall, the staff, they're going to have to keep fighting. And that's not news to anybody, but I almost uniquely so in this case, I think Illinois really, really wants Jacob Eberhart. And, for people that would kind of dismiss Illinois, Eddie, they're a kind of dark horse playoff contender. Like Illinois got a chance to make some noise this year. So I think the idea that it's just Illinois, that's not really the case beyond just his father being an alum and those kind of things. Like I think there is more to it than just that. And Illinois seems to have things going in the right direction right now.
I think everybody around here, or at least that listens to the Unofficial 40, knows that we're pretty big fans of Brett Bielema. It seems like anywhere that he ends up, they end up being a pretty damn good football team. And now that he has a couple years under his belt, put a couple guys in the NFL as well with the really good defensive line that they had a couple years ago. It seems like things are changing in Champaign. Maybe a little bit more hot seat talk there for Brad Underwood on the basketball side with that basketball program that didn't seem to get over the hump this past year. In terms of player, you're talking about a 6'1", 210 guy. Obviously, he would fit the mold of what Oklahoma has been recruiting there in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, this is some Michael Boganowski kind of stuff. And I've even heard that 6'1" is a little shy.
Ooh, wow.
He might be more 6'2", 6'2" plus. Like he's a big kid. So, and very physical. And the thing that, when you talk to people about, what kind of put Oklahoma where we believe they are right now is really just the situation with, I think they made him feel like part of the family. He's a kid that he's gone through a lot. What he sees in Oklahoma too, like that, we're a family here. This stuff matters to us. We're not just talking about it. We really do, whatever you can say about Brent Venables, he cares about his guys. And I think that is something that resonates with Jacob Eberhart. So again, that's why I think Oklahoma's in really good shape here. But at the same time, this is a guy, when you talk to some folks, they think he's pretty undervalued. This is another guy that Oklahoma really likes. They like the tape on. This is a guy that OU was in on early, and then kind of, to my understanding, the front office came back, saw him, was like, yeah, we're in. We like this kid. So I think it's a really kind of a unanimous feeling of everybody very much on board with Jacob Eberhart.
One of those times, Josh, too, that happened this week that I don't think has happened very often here, probably as of late in 2025, certainly 2025, but even the last couple of years, it doesn't seem like there's any surprises that come in the recruiting world these days. This week, that happened, and it's going to be one of those moments that you kind of remember where you were when somebody committed, and that happened with Texas Tech and Felix Ojo. Felix Ojo ends up committing to Joey McGuire and Texas Tech early this week. Surprise, shock, kind of abound on the social media world as Felix Ojo made that announcement. How surprised were you, I think is probably the best way to say it and to start, because this kind of it connects back into Oklahoma and their recruiting at offensive tackle, just from an angle of just recruiting as a whole. Felix Ojo ending up in Lubbock, shocking.
Stunned. I can't think of another word for it. This was Texas Tech. And again, yeah, they've got a lot of NIL, and that's great and all that. This is one of the first times we've seen NIL just go beat great programs that have plenty of NIL of their own. This isn't, this isn't a situation where, a school that we know is a very good football program, but maybe doesn't have the NIL in order. They got beat by a team that just has deep pockets. This was deep pockets getting beat by deeper pockets. And that's wild. I mean, like that's a crazy thing. And again, like I know Texas Tech, and I get why they would bristle at that, being the summary of the events. But this isn't a guy that took a bunch of Texas Tech visits and there was this feeling that, oh, they're always hanging around. No, they weren't even in his top four like a week ago, or I guess a week before his announcement. And then all of a sudden he's committed to Texas Tech over four schools that he'd taken a bunch of trips to that we know have a lot of NIL. Like it's a shocking turn. Like, I mean, it really is. And, Eddie, the thing is, and you said it well, like kind of, one of those things that's a pivotal moment. And I felt like this was kind of the earthquake. And then you had all these aftershocks, all these tremors that obviously Oklahoma fans had to feel some of it. And I know we're going to talk about one of those guys. So this is, and I think it was one of those deals that kind of woke everybody up. Like, oh, these things can happen. This isn't the old days where just because of the name on your helmet, you'll overcome every dollar amount. And that's not the way this is always going to work.
There's a certain amount of legitimacy that comes with it, and especially when you see the numbers, 3 years, $5.1 million was put out there for Felix Ojo, who's still yet to go into his senior season at Mansfield in the DFW area. Those ripple effects that can be felt through Norman and maybe even as far east in the state of Oklahoma as Fort Gibson, as Oklahoma's pursuit of 2027 offensive tackle Cooper Hackett. And Cooper Hackett was one of those guys you've seen a star kind of blossom here over the course of the spring and into the summer, as his name became really kind of one of those names to know in the 2027 class. Oklahoma and Cooper Hackett, it was once felt that, if Oklahoma did all the right things, he was going to end up in Norman when it was all said and done. Since the Felix Ojo commitment, and maybe even before that, Josh, we had heard some ripples or maybe some rumors out there that maybe Texas Tech was starting to become a real player for Cooper Hackett. Where is Oklahoma with Cooper Hackett, and in turn, Cooper Hackett and Texas Tech? How serious is that moving forward?
This one's really interesting on a few levels because, first of all, I think Texas Tech, and I know people could – and maybe do want to summarize, oh, it's just money. I don't like Felix Ojo. Okay. Yeah, I can get there with you. Cooper Hackett, they've already brought him down a couple times. There's a good relationship there. They've done a good job making not just him and his family feel comfortable, but also the coaching staff. They've done some things at Fort Gibson that really show kind of like a firsthand, very kind of soft touch in recruiting that I don't want to go into all of it, but like they've done a good job, like getting to know the people and knowing kind of the right buttons to push. And that shouldn't surprise anyone who has ever talked to Joey McGuire. That is the kind of person he is. He's a very, very personable human being, and he recruits like it. At the same time, I still think that if all things are equal or even close to equal, I think Oklahoma is still really hard to beat in this recruitment. Now, can they match Texas Tech dollar for dollar? We know they can't. Like that's not the way this is going to work. At the same time, I don't think they have to. I think Oklahoma has to be close. I think they've got to be competitive. He's not going to give them an insane discount just for being Oklahoma. But I do think they get some discount because of Bill Bedenbaugh, because of his track record with offensive linemen, and because Cooper Hackett grew up an Oklahoma fan. That's where his heart is. It really is. At the same time, that only takes you so far when you're talking about these kind of numbers. So Oklahoma's going to have to be competitive, and I know that makes people nervous. We saw OU do the same thing with Michael Fasusi, so it can be done. It's not like some crazy equation, but they can do this. So I think what Oklahoma is going to have to do is stay around, be involved. They didn't panic when all this happened. And, I put something up on the board. The very little I got to talk about with this Cooper Hackett situation, it was just kind of like, guys, just stay calm. Like, let this play out a little bit. I will say one last thing. Again, it's one of those things I can't cover all of it. But when I talk to people around Fort Gibson, around the Hackett family a little bit, I get the impression that some of the way this has been disseminated, some of the way this has been handled, I think there's some unease. I think maybe and I don't think anybody is putting that on Texas Tech. Like, I want to be clear about that. I don't think they love all of the way this got out, the reception that it's gotten from people. So I think they're very leery of that. This is a family that just wants to go through the recruiting process, do it as normally as possible. And so I think that this could be something that actually kind of works out okay for Oklahoma, because I think they're probably taking a long look at everything and everybody that's involved in this process for them.
Well, I can't imagine going from a relatively unknown about a year ago and being thrown into this world that kind of is full tilt. Everything is thrown at you at one time type of recruitment. I'm just thinking about the conversation we just had about Jake Cruel and wanting to see how Oklahoma does. I think it could probably be fair to say the flip side of it could be said for Texas Tech, and seeing if this is actually going to work. You can throw a bunch of money, as we've seen through some schools, whether it be Missouri or Ole Miss in the SEC as of the last year, and there was a lot of attention placed on them. There's going to be a ton of attention placed on Texas Tech to kind of get over that hump from where they've been in Joey McGuire's tenure in Lubbock. So certainly something to watch. It's going to be fascinating to see not just what happens in Lubbock this year, but in the future here with 2027 offensive tackle Cooper Hackett and Oklahoma. Still a couple years there, obviously, to get through before we get to the end of his commitment, end of his recruitment, rather. So lastly, this was it made waves while you were out of town, Josh, and I think that everybody's had a little bit of an opinion on it. I know one of our correspondents, Jeff Ketchum, out of Austin, he covers Oklahoma football as well, has certainly had his mentions filled with resentment, I guess, outside of what Jim Nagy's doing. Let's listen to the clip first, because he was on the Triple Option podcast. Urban Meyer, Rob Stone, Mark Ingram. He joined them talking about kind of the value and how they're setting everything up for the front office at Oklahoma and recruiting high school players.
The assistant coaches have had all the autonomy to go out and recruit the guys they want to recruit and watch the tape. And ultimately, it's been the head coach's decision on who you take and who you build the roster around. So we're just bringing that structure. We're bringing a grading system, which most college programs don't have. So that's where I think we're going to have value. And again, really more than anything, it's the manpower. So we're going to have a staff of 8, 9, 10 guys watching tape that are experienced, proven evaluators. And again, I don't think there's a lot of schools in college football that have that. I don't know if there are any right now. I think there's probably some that will go in that direction. But the great thing is the buy-in. The coolest part of the job so far has been the buy-in from the assistants, right? Like, I didn't want to come in here and just blow this thing up, watching tape and maybe not agree with where they were at with some of their assessments on players. We haven't done that. These guys have worked really hard on the 2026 class, but there have been some times where we've had to finesse it and pivot a little bit, right? And get on some new players. And the coolest part is they have taken that and ran with it. And we've gotten some commitments here already in June from players that we didn't get on until a month or two ago. And I credit the coaches because they went after them and they recruited their tails off. And that's always going to be a big part of this. Like, we can evaluate the players, and a great belief in our new staff's ability to do that and find value. But at the end of the day, you still have to recruit them. Yeah. You still got to love them up. You still got to make these guys feel like Oklahoma is going to be their home. So.
That was Jim Nagy on the Triple Option podcast with Urban Meyer, Mark Ingram, and Rob Stone. And certainly it's unconventional, Josh. I think that it's a little bit of a unique, look at what they're trying to do from a front office perspective. We've covered it. We've documented it. George has wrote about it. We've talked about it here on this podcast, or on the Unofficial 40 podcast, as well as here on the program on the Recruiting Report on Soonerscoop.com's YouTube channel. But, time will tell if this is the right way to go about it in this newfound world that is college football. But if nothing else, I think that it's intriguing from our side of things and kind of covering it rather closely, how it's all going to work out for Oklahoma.
Yeah, there's a lot in there that's really interesting. I think the grading system and the way, Eddie, we talked to some people at camp about that, last month, where they were kind of discussing kind of the way that everybody is going to have an input and kind of make their own grades. And then at the end of it, you kind of get to see where everybody was, rather than letting, like the front office's opinions affect how the coaches see film, or or vice versa, whatever it may be. So I think you get a very honest evaluation. And this is like, okay, everybody loved this guy, or like this position coach liked him, but maybe our front office staff wasn't as sure. And you guys can kind of talk that out. They can figure that out. I think that's really important, because you're not getting any pollution of, oh, the front office guys really like this guy, or this particular front office guy liked him, and I don't, I haven't liked what he's seen. Like, it's very, you get to walk into it with open eyes, and I think that's really important. I love, we can talk about attracting players as talent. I would think this model will attract coaches that have talent, because you get to, like, we've heard coaches talking about this for 4 or 5 years now. There's not enough time. I don't get any time with my family. I don't get to have any real life, because I'm evaluating tape. I'm working on the portal. I'm doing, like, it's just never ending right now for these assistant coaches. Well, hey, look, man, we're gonna filter out a lot of the stuff you had to do, and you can go watch the guys that we think are really worth your time. And I think that saves so much. Streamlines a ton of things. The only other thing I wanted to add, because like you said, I hadn't had a chance to weigh in on this at all.
Sure.
In that same interview, he talked about, and I know a lot of people were kind of upset about, if we have we like a 3-star as much as this 5-star, we're going to take the 3-star because he's of greater value. Guys, that's just smart. Like, I know people would expect me to, because I'm a rankings guy and all that stuff, to care. No. If that's how you see it, I think in the perfect example we're talking about is Deacon Schmidt and Felix Ojo. Oh, you prefer Deacon Schmidt to Felix Ojo. Now, you can agree with that, disagree with that, whatever. That's fine. But if they see it that way and they're the ones putting their neck on the line, I think that's just good business. It makes all the sense in the world to operate in that way. So I think people kind of respond to that to say, oh, they're not going to go after 5-stars. That's not what he's saying. For them, Deacon Schmidt's a 5-star. That's what he's telling you. So I think people took that the wrong way and didn't understand what he meant by it. Oklahoma's going to go chase big fish too. But if they can save some money on one guy so they can spend a little more on the next guy, or the next guy out of the portal, that's just smart. Like that's just good business.
I think that was a common misconception out there from a lot of people that rather, either watched the entire segment that they did with Jim Nagy, or just took the clips as they saw on social media, on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, that, yeah, Oklahoma's going to still recruit 5-stars. You're simply not going to be able to win if you can't get the best of the best. You still have room, though, for development. You still have room for evaluation and believing in what you're doing. And I think that there's nobody that believes in his evaluation process more than what Jim Nagy's trying to do, as well as the rest of his front office. So it's, we're not going to be able to see the end result or the sample size. It's going to have to be much bigger than just 1 year. But most, all things considered, you're looking at this 2026 class as well as moving into 27, where Oklahoma, as we've talked about, Josh, is extremely talented in that 27 in-state group.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an area where, again, like Eddie, you look at the guys they've gone after. Caden Penny, top 100 guy. Cooper Hackett, 5-star kind of guy. Samaj Stanford, I think he's one of the best safeties to come out of Oklahoma in a decade. Like, there, you go down the list, there's a bunch of big-time dudes, and Oklahoma has wasted no time with any of those guys. Like, they've been very aggressive. So I think it's just this misconception that people have that because Oklahoma wants to be smart with their NIL and spend it where they have to, if okay, cool, we can overpay a little here because we found a deal here on Deacon Schmidt or whoever it may be. Tyler Ruxer is a great example too, where they really like him more. Now, like I've always said, I'm not, I know people be like, oh, he's changing his tune. I'm not. Betting that you're always good, like signing a 25-man class where you got nothing but bargains, that's not going to work.
Sure.
Like that you're not that much smarter than everybody else. And I think Jim Nagy would probably tell you the same. But you've got to take advantage where you do find some market value. And that's and I know that's weird for people to hear when we're talking about high school players, but this is NFL free agency. We'll take the third best guard if we can get the first best, wide receiver,
sure,
or whatever it may be. You're working within a certain amount of money, and you've got to make your choices in relation to that.
The week begins with Tyler Ruxer's commitment. You have Jacob Eberhart's decision coming on Saturday evening. We'll have full coverage either way. Oklahoma, if he ends up committing to Oklahoma, or maybe Illinois slides in late. We'll see on Saturday night. Check out SoonerScoop.com for more coverage from St. Louis, Missouri. All right, that's going to do it, Josh. We appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to stateside, and we will talk to you on Monday for another recruiting report before Carrie, Josh, and George and myself head down to Atlanta for SEC Media Day next week at the College Football Hall of Fame. We will see you here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel next time. Bye-bye.